The usual things, but they're totally and genuinely meant, which is a big set of thank yous. And I regret rather a long list of people to thank, but I want to start now just so we can get through it by this evening, by dinner time. The first two people we need to thank for this event are Sarah Saunders, the producer, without whom we couldn't have done this at all. And Caroline Nevian down here, who brought in a lot of expertise from Amsterdam and a series a bit of work. Now we've got a lot of people also to thank, because there were a lot of people involved in this. The tech staff here, right in this building, and who've been doing so much to make all this happen, is Jose, Juan, Annie, David, Ten, Benedict, Katie, and Jennifer. I know they're all here. And then there was the team assembled to make all this happen by us, and that was Ross, Madeline, Sarah Van, Sander, and Lizzie, directly from the thing. And from CIJ itself, there was Tom, Manal, Juliet, Marina, the film crew, and Nana, all of them together. Please don't get tired clapping. There's more to come. Then we have the crypto bar, which is sort of the essential underpinning skeleton of what we want to do with some of this, and that's Aryan, Silky, Felicity, Simon, and the Angels. And now there's a list of volunteers coming now too, which is Alex, Ben, Elaine, Hepe, Joanna, Cara, Kari, Katia, Luke, Michelle, Niall, and Rob. For that. And then there's the Newspeak team of Tarquin, Emma, and all the tech and media team for the kids show that we just had, and all of you will have seen already today. And then, no small thanks to the people who made this all happen. And that's Richard Logan in the front row down here. And that's been a spate of unusual generosity, and it's made all this really plausible. Democracy and Media in Amsterdam. There was also Goldsmiths, who helped a lot. In some way or other, we're trying to figure that out, but they did. ThoughtWorks, who did some practical and real help with a lot of things here, and we hope to establish a long relationship with the good work that they do as a company. Wohl Holland in Berlin, and CCC in Germany, and Rutini Wines. A very important final contribution. But all of them, without their work, we couldn't have done a lot of this. And with that, at the end, And a quick burst of final news, which is the news and people doing a lot of work for us, are the 4 Coleman Getty team, Rosie, Matt, Truda, and Liz. And there was also a team at the Barbican here, Nia, Niall, and the tech team, and Brian in catering. Many, many thanks to all you all.
All right, big thanks to Gavin. Everybody, it's that, yeah. All right, everyone, we are in that after tea break moment, and it's an exciting moment, and we're in our last session, and I'm just going to do that annoying American thing of having you just get up for a second and shake off the energy, and just come on, just play with me for a minute. Alliance building, build an alliance here with me now. Just shake up your body just a little tiny bit. Yay, yay, yay. All right, you're awake, you're awake. All right, you're more or less awake. We're going to have the format for this afternoon, or this part of the afternoon, is going to be as follows, if I can maintain it. We're going to have a little bit of feedback from you. Not each one. I don't want you to share your names. You don't have to hold hands. I'm going to get a little bit of interaction from you about what you're taking away so far from this event and what questions you have for this moment. And then we're going to come to our panelists, and everybody's going to just share along the similar kind of lines for about 4 to 5 minutes each. They'll have a little bit of time for conversation amongst themselves. And then the lion's share of this session is going to be all of you sharing your thoughts and how you want to go forward and how you think the future is looking to you. First, I want to get a sense, how many people went to the crypto bar? Just put your hand up. You don't have to stand up. All right. And how many of you feel you're a little bit more encrypted now than you were before? All right, good. How many of you are looking at your cell phone with a kind of askance glance in the way that you weren't before, although many of you, I'm sure, were? And how many of you have seen the future? How many of you went to visit the future? By which I mean, with all due respect, not the kids' place, but the incredible young people down at the Newspeak studio. How many of you went down to the Newspeak studio? You visited the future. The future is in our young journalists, in our young people with the passion to do this work. We're in a profession that is facing no end of challenges. And for me, anyway, to see so many people so dedicated to continuing the most heroic, not the most cowardly tradition of journalism, with all their creativity and with all their sense of cooperation and collaboration. I want to give just a huge round to everybody who's here. For me, I would say that the title of this conference hasn't accurately reflected the title I'm taking away when I will describe what this conference was about. We say it was against something. We said it's against surveillance, censorship, and something else. Secrecy. That was secret. I'm filled now, because of the brilliant way this conference was organized, with a real sense of positivity and possibility. And I think that rather than having been an event against things, it's actually been an event very much for something. And it was crystallized in the last panel for me as people talked in one way or another about using technology to claim our humanity, to protect our humanity, and our ability to feel. Remember what Dan Ellsberg said? He had all these people with all this access for information. They all knew that something terrible was happening in the world, that they could make a difference. It was the feeling of commitment, of empathy, of determination, the ability to have a contact with your own conscience enough to say you'll risk something for somebody else. It was that made the difference. And he says that happens once every 30 years. Is that enough? I think this conference is a lot about not letting it be enough to wait 30 years. And how do we use technology in an era of incredible extremes of power, extremes of securitization, as Julian talked about, extremes of separation, which all the people who have joined us by Skype, Jake, Laura Poitras, kind of reflect. How do we use this technology and one another and our creativity to connect in a moment of separation and to find empathy in that culture of division and fear? Some of the questions that I'm entering this session with have things like, where are the sites of struggle for this future claiming of ours? How do we gain empowerment through technology, not more fear and paranoia? Are we running into any dangers of of being hammers and seeing the solution to all our problems as, well, is that how it works? Nails and hammers? Seeing everything as a nail if you have a hammer? Are all our challenges technological, or are they something else? And do we run a risk of being in pursuit of the great tech fix that will in the end create more gated communities, where some of us are protected and fixed, but not exactly not the people we need to be hearing from most. I think for me it was very powerful as a person who started my reporting in Northern Ireland, which was part of what drove me away from this country, in the early 80s, and was witness to some of the assassinations, not the state assassinations, but the plastic bullet killings that were reported on by our friends from Northern Ireland, from Derry. It was very powerful to see how they were using material in the National Archives, along with talking to their neighbors, along with simple old foot leather reporting and great technological skill, to actually reopen a torture case at the European Court for the first time ever, all these years afterwards. I think it's been powerful to hear from people in this room who have traveled the world and tell us that their sources are the people who have the least access to technology. Their sources are the people that have the perhaps greatest access to their own courage and dare to tell their tales, but have the least protection as they do it. Caroline raised the important point about public space. What is even our notion of public space in this context? And what are we going to do to protect it? What would the diggers, are we the diggers of today, fighting the enclosure of the 21st century? If so, where do we plant? And what do we plant? Right? And finally, I guess, how do we use the binary to live in complexity? Every time I hear us challenged to remember that Chelsea Manning is Chelsea, I'm reminded that in her own identity, she is reminding us we live out of binary. We live in complexity. Not to oversimplify, but the personal is political. Oh, she's such a feminist. Let's hear from some of you. Let's hear from some of you about what you've done. Has anybody talked to somebody that they didn't know? Give me an example, right here in the white shirt. Who'd you talk to? White shirt, who'd you talk to that you didn't know? We're talking about alliance building. Did you make an alliance? Get up, stand up, would you? I'm going to ask everyone that comments today to stand up.
I didn't bid an alliance, but I'm willing to help to the documentary that the CAG are building in March. I have a hacker friend now, and a bunch of journalists, and I can see a future here.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you for letting me put you on the spot. I appreciate that. Someone else, anyone else make an alliance or see a future to an alliance that they didn't walk in the door with? Or anyone want to share a question that they have for this moment, for this panel, maybe for themselves? Beatrice, I know you have a thought. Here, Caroline, Beatrice, she's going to show up here. Here. Question for us, perhaps.
Well, it's not a question. I was just going to say I had the great pleasure of sitting next to Andy at dinner the first night, and I'm going to importune him for something.
Ooh, as yet unspecified. As yet unspecified importunement going to happen. One last one, and then we'll come to our panelists. You have a question for the folks up here that you want us to think about? Down here, Caroline. Practical question. I don't think I can answer that. It may be a matter of the nature of our alliances, I suspect. Any more? Anyone speak to somebody of a different generation? There you go.
I never thought that I'd get to meet Seymour Hersh.
There you go. How great was that? I never thought I'd have to wrestle with Seymour Hersh.
He's brilliant but grumpy.
I completely concur. I concur. Brilliant but grumpy. Oh, there we go.
I got to meet Daniel Ellsberg, and he was brilliant and lovely.
See, escaping the binary into complexity. Anyone else? Yeah.
I got to meet John Pilger, and I was just impressed by his brilliance, how he continues. And I think it motivated me to keep on with my work.
I bet he was impressed with yours too.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right, thank you so much. Well, I didn't get to meet anywhere near enough people here, but I was very happy to be here, and I thank you all for schlepping me over here from New York. So, let's begin. Let's start with you, Karin. What are you bringing in to this session in the way of questions, thoughts, decisions, plans? Future alliances.
Yeah. Well, first of all, obstacles as well. The biggest obstacle, I think, somebody mentioned yesterday, this feeling of fatigue, which actually I would more describe as despair. Sometimes I think there is so much wrong and it's becoming so big, and then I think of climate change and I go, okay, I'd better give up. I'll stay in bed and that's it. And trying to overcome this feeling of despair, that actually, there is some brilliance in it. It's what I've been seeing during the whole conference. Very often it takes just a few people to start inspiring us again, and it's very much the whistleblowers and the people who write about them. And what I thought was really, really brilliant about the conference is it brought together journalists, hackers, whistleblowers, lawyers, artists. And we didn't have a parallel program, so we were forced to stay together and think with other people. As for new alliances, what's been lacking, and I think we all know the notion of crowdfunding. What I think we should start thinking about is crowd-suing.
Crowd-suing?
Yes, because by now we're talking about lawyering up, and we have a number of really, really great lawyers, and they're human rights lawyers, but they defend one person per case. It's Snowden, it's Manning, it's people from WikiLeaks, and it's whistleblowers. But we need to have lawyers who start suing the state, not defending people who are being harassed by the state. For instance, in the Netherlands, there is now a court case. It started a couple of days ago. In a number of European countries, the data retention law has been deemed illegal. In the end, very much thanks to Germany and a couple of other countries, the European Court said it's illegal, and the Dutch still keep it up. Yeah, but in the Netherlands, finally, the Dutch Association of Journalists, Privacy First, and the Organization of Penal Lawyers started a case against the government, and we should do that much, much more often. So we should really start thinking about crowd-suing, gathering money to sue specific instances, and we might need to talk about what case could be won and how we deal with the money and where we can find the weak spot. But we really should start not only defending ourselves. Attacking is a big word, but we should be more proactive.
Get on the on the offensive.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be great to get some thoughts from the folks who were in the legal workshop this morning at some point. So.
And as for alliances, what I've learned myself, my first real big court case was with Scientology, and that started not because I was a member of Scientology or that I knew people who were members of Scientology. I didn't know anything about Scientology. The reason why I started was that they were infringing upon an internet right, the right to freedom of speech. And suddenly, and I was not the only one, but suddenly these people who had been fighting Scientology for a long time found themselves enriched and aligned with a completely new group that they could not have foreseen. And I think that's one of the brilliances of a conference like this. This is where you can build these alliances that you really had not thought about. And one more example, in the Netherlands it's been transpiring that all these computer courses for children in schools do more than just give out material and rate you. They actually collect information about you, which is going to the editors, which in turn sell it. Suddenly, parents are becoming much more interested in privacy than they ever were, because they say, yeah, I don't do any, but my children, you stay the fuck away from my children. Suddenly, you have a new alliance.
Thank you. Nikki?
First for myself, I'm going to take away quite a lot of specific ideas and suggestions and context, but the main thing that someone like me takes away from this is that it's enriching to spend time with so many unselfish people and people who are in ones and groups are doing so many good things. Thank you. I appreciate being here. And I want to give 3 ideas on the subject of our discussion now. First one I mentioned yesterday, when we're talking about alliances between hacktivists and hackers, or IT people, or whatever you want to call it, and investigative journalists, my specific idea I said yesterday, which I want to repeat because I think it would be so worth sharing around, is that we should not be having a generalized alliance of ideas. We should be having a specific aligning of individuals. Actually, as I said yesterday, I have had a series of fantastic information security and computer people who have worked with me, and it's enhanced my work immensely, and it's become our work, and we've done great projects. And I think I would actually promote the idea that there are systems of recommending people and finding people and giving assurance of the trustworthiness of people to each other, so that other people can have this advantage too, because having one person you can rely on for your information security and for your data, helping on your data processing and figuring out problems in the increasingly complex opportunities of the IT world, the digital world, enhances your work immensely. So that's my first idea. I actually think do it individually, but also there could be systems for doing this collectively. Second idea I want to bring along is, I don't usually like conferences. I think this has been a really fantastic conference, and I want to propose an idea of how it could be even better. And that is that the normal formula of a conference is that there are speakers, and people listen, and 2 or 3 people ask questions, and then for the participants, you luckily meet a few interesting people that you happen to bump into in the hall or something. And I think that a conference like this, if it had a third of the time, actively putting together all the people here, not just speakers, but everyone here, actually mixing up people, having sessions where people run into each other, there would be a great deal of chemistry and good stuff would come out of that. So I would just say, as a structure, when you do this again, when you all do this again, I would suggest that as part of your structure from the beginning, in the middle, and through to the end. And more alliances will be built and more stuff will happen. I had one more idea in my jet lag. Final idea is that I think in terms of capability, I think we should all be thinking about the definition of what is an investigative journalist, because there is so much work to do. We need to expand this idea. That if we define investigative journalists as being people who are paid full-time in the Washington Post or something like that, then it's an extinction. It's a highly endangered species. Or, plus some lone people who have got the determination. We actually need to build the concept and draw as many people into this work as possible. I'm talking about a lot of the investigative journalism today is done by people who don't even give themselves that title. That's filmmakers and authors and so on. But let's keep pushing it open. Let's look at people. Let's look at the hacktivists. How many of those could actually be changing their hats and taking on a project and carrying it on? And lawyers and academics and retired people and parents, journalists who have now stopped work while they have their children, but they can write the book about the thing they always wanted to, and so on and so on. That the thing that should be uniting about investigative journalism is the standards, the journalistic standards, the mission, the motivations that underlie it, rather than some self-narrowing definition of who does it. And the broader we make it, the more people there will be to do all the work that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Well, first of all, drinking and having an occasion to sing songs with the people of Newspeak gave me hope in the next generation, and that's something. It's not just about the drinking and all the singing. I hope we are building an alliance to take back control of the machines. I think this is absolutely fundamental, absolutely critical. And it is about a model of society we want to build where we are, every one of us, in a distributed way, owning a little bit of power, owning a little bit of infrastructure, and in control, rather than letting the real masters of the machines have it their way. We know for a fact now that the real masters of our machines are located somewhere between Wall Street, the Silicon Valley, and the US State Department. And we may still have this tiny window of opportunity to gain back control of the machines. And actually, mass surveillance, I think, is one of the most important symptoms, but just a symptom, of this battle for knowledge we are fighting today. I hate to use those military vocabularies, but I think it is a battle for knowledge. And I hope we are building an alliance to win this battle. When you look at the characteristics of technology that is today designed to control us, technology that has been turned against us, turned against the people, it is technology that relies on centralization of data and our communication, that relies on private software, proprietary software that we cannot understand and we cannot control, hardware we cannot control, and an illusion of security where you close your eyes, you trust the nice white logo, and everything is going to be fine. All those characteristics define technology that has been made to disempower individuals, to withdraw from them the knowledge about the functioning of the machine. And so I think we are building this alliance for empowerment of individuals through the knowledge of the functioning of the machine, through in exact opposite of those patterns for technology that controls, decentralization of services and communication, free libre software that belongs to everyone, public software. You have the great honor to have Richard Stallman here to speak about this. It is about controlling the machine rather than being controlled by it. We need also open hardware we can trust. And instead of that illusion of security, security in our hands through end-to-end encryption, where we understand the concepts and we use them efficiently. It is about being empowered. It is about appropriating technology. And it is only at this cost that technology will make us more free. As a conclusion of this introduction, I think we are walking, and we will be walking on three legs. One is the technological, and we've seen, well, Richard has started the GNU project and free software 31 years ago, telling us that software could be used for control or for freedom. So we are doing it. We didn't wait for Mr. Snowden to give his life for us to know before we started building tools that empower us. The second leg, of course, is political, and we've won major victories against ACTA, the anti-counterfeiting trade agreement, against SOPA and PIPA in the US, on some Arab countries, on some unsung resolutions in the European Parliament. We demonstrated when the internet, in all its glorious and joyful diversity, gets angry against something, we get things done. And here again, we have a handbook. The third leg is the one that matters the most for me today, and I think the one we didn't invest willfully so far. It's the cultural aspects. And when we will move forward on this leg, I think we will make the two others move forward. It is about making everyone understand that it's not, on one side, the technology that is user-friendly, because we know it is actually user-enemy, making choices against ourselves, against common interests, and provoking massive violations of fundamental rights and massive injustice. And on the other hand, it's not, oh, it's too complicated because I can't understand because I'm not an engineer or a genius or whatever. No, it is technology that we all can understand, that we must understand, because this is the key to empowerment and participation in a free society.
Thank you. Jake, let's see if we can... Can we go to Jake next? Yes, there he is.
No, I'm trapped in this box. I think that it's really quite an honor to be back again, and I wanted to say thanks to Gavin and to everyone who, of course, has made this possible. And I really want to echo what Jeremy has said, and I want to take it a little bit further. What I think is important is to say that free software, usability, and security specialists really need to created an alliance with the high-risk users, for example, that are at this symposium. I think that's very, very important, and I think that there's a survival advantage to journalists that recognize this and to who actually take this seriously. There are a lot of journalists that won't, and I think that that's very dangerous. So groups like the Debian GNU Linux project, which seemingly have nothing to do with investigative journalism, they actually help build the base of things like Subgraph or the Tor project. And to make free, Libre, and open source software sustainable, we need to find ways to finance and sustain it. So for example, the Subgraph guys, they maintain by consulting. They should be doing security consulting, if possible, for people that are in this room instead of for people like Goldman Sachs. Quite frankly, because fuck Goldman Sachs, we need journalists, and we need them to have security. And so we have a self-sustaining community of this. That said, I think we need to have an alignment that is post-nationalist. And I think that that is really difficult to someone, but with all of humanity, without any exception. When we talk strikes, in some cases people say, well, how many people of my nation were killed before they determined that those people had value in their lives? And that kind of post-nationalist alignment is sometimes missing. I mean, living in Europe, one thing I've noticed is that Europeans tend to have a greater consciousness of this because most of your neighbors can in fact be from another state. You can't just simply look to your neighbor and say, they're like me. I get this a lot actually when dealing with Andy Muller-Magoon. He and I come from very different places, but we have an alignment that transcends our states and even the base from which we come from in a sense. But that said, I think journalists need to adopt a posture about security and privacy and autonomy, essentially. And that builds a base of solid ground because it basically shows a preemptive dedication to not only protecting sources, but also to protecting oneself. And that creates trustworthy relationship, I think, as a basis. And ultimately what this comes down to, I think, and I haven't heard a lot of people talking about it, and I blame Gavin, actually, for what I'm going to say next, or maybe I should say I credit Gavin for this, but that is to say that we need to have and to recognize class interests. And that fundamentally is something that is often left out of these kinds of discussions. The reality is that corporations in the state are naturally aligned by class interests. That's why they created the PRISM program. And it is the case that intelligence services are going to be helping them whenever it is possible. So let us look at the class interests here. Free software and open hardware are aligned with our class interests of civil society actors, especially journalists, but ultimately every person without exception. And that means, of course, that free software will also benefit, unfortunately, intelligence services. But it may be the case that we can build alternatives that each of us can examine without having to be beholden either to a corporation or to a state. Pardon me. And I think that that is extremely important to do, to take a look at it from a class perspective and to figure out how to have class consciousness and class solidarity. And free software will be a part of that, but it will not be just free software. It will be a political alignment where we have a dedication to opening up information to everyone.
Thanks, Jake. Gavin, to you.
Okay, I won't say too much that's already been said, but and I certainly applaud it. The purpose of this conference was to build, as we've heard so frequently, an alliance between all the people who have, thanks, all the people who have a common interest. And the common interest is fundamentally a political one. However we dress it up and in what language, it's fundamentally a political one. It really means that whistleblowers who are exposing injustice are doing exactly what investigative journalists need to do and is their sole and effective purpose. That the struggle against... Terrific. But there is a serious need to expose injustice and inequality and Big Brother on behalf, really, of a free information society with free speech, free press, a free internet. But in fact, all the things that the left, I suppose you could say, has traditionally always stood for. And at least the democratic non-statist left, if you will. But in any event, with those things, that we have a unanimity of interest. And we have found in the last 3 years an extraordinary potential alliance developing. Because after all, Julian Assange, with the extraordinary work that he did with forming WikiLeaks and helping whistleblowers to come without injury into the public domain, is an extraordinary achievement, and that door was opened. And through that have come a lot of other people. There are now something in the order of 40 WikiLeaks-like Dropboxes around the world. Some of them effective, some of them not so, but it means that it's spreading. The notion that people can actually say things of some real importance to get their injustices, the things that they react so strongly against, into the public domain. I mean, we've always had, as investigative reporters, a simple sort of slogan that we would rant on about, and it's very simple. It's to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And without that, we're all in great injury. And I would just say further that the notion that hackers have a community of interest with journalists is obvious. It's clear. It's why we're all together here. It's been responsible for the biggest scoops in the history of modern journalism that have just been transpiring the last 3 or 4 years, and all have involved whistleblowers. So I would only say that the alliances we want to build are to protect whistleblowers, to provide a nurturing environment for whistleblowers. And that means they need the active protection, as journalists do, of the work of hackers. And journalists need to think very carefully about how they can best assist hackers when the arrests will no doubt be coming. We forget that a large number of hackers have been subject to terrible penalties for what they've done. Often extremely innocent folk have been suffering quite seriously, and we need to be able to stand up with them, and our skills as journalists should be at their disposal. Anyway, thanks very much.
Thank you. Is there somebody who was on the making the law, changing the law panel that wants to talk a little bit to some of these points apropos of the discussion that you had earlier this morning? This was the one parallel session period, and people are sorry they weren't at everything. Yeah. But if you were at the legal one, given that it's come up a couple of times.
Is Kenny here? Kenny, no. Carrie? Oh, can you maybe comment?
Sorry.
Looking for you, sorry, that to get you out here. Could you maybe talk a bit about the legal?
About what alliances can help us change the laws?
Should I do it from back here?
Sure.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone.
Come on up. Here, there's a chair.
Oh. Thanks. Good to be here up here with you guys. Yeah, I think some of the conclusions from earlier from our legal panel, I'm really sorry that Ben, Carly, and Gavin can't be here. But the general consensus was that there's a lot of optimism in the future with legal developments, but we have to be careful about what our goals are. And one of the core themes that came out was what are we really trying to accomplish when we're talking about the future of laws. And there are really 3 different things. One, we can talk about trying to amend laws, so to take existing laws that are perhaps flawed and make them better. And this is one thing that I discussed in my talk, where I explored the idea of introducing public interest defenses for whistleblowers in different jurisdictions, for which there's a great need, and whistleblowers like Edward Snowden, contrary to belief of John Kerry and Hillary Clinton, won't have a chance to have a fair trial in the United States because he wouldn't even be able to present evidence that his disclosures serve the public interest. So that's the first thing, is fixing existing laws. The second is passing new laws, trying to introduce new legislation in the future. And the third, I think, which is really the most critical, is to ignore those first 2 and really advocate for structural change. That the system has gone so bad that changing laws and passing new laws isn't going to help, that we really need something more fundamental. And Bernd Fix actually had a very, very good analogy earlier to changing basically an operating system environment, where there's a point at which you can't keep patching a problem. And in many ways, passing laws in a flawed system is kind of like patching a flawed operating system. Eventually, there's a need to install a new operating system, and what that means in today's age is still being explored. But we really have come to a point where we need to be united in changing the way that we think about our underlying system and the way that it works. And that's where I think legally there needs to be the most collaboration, and there's the greatest room for alliances, is trying to come up with a common vision of how we're going to solve that problem. Because yes, we can pass laws, and we lawyers are working on that. We're working on trying to amend the law. But ultimately, I think the room is for open information and activism and advocacy.
Thank you. To your point, Karen, about the possibility of getting more on the offensive and the idea of group suing, what do you think are the biggest obstacles to that? What's holding us back?
It's expensive, that's one. And I think you really need to choose wisely, because there is so much that we would like to change. But I don't have a list as in, well, let's do this and this and this. But the idea that we should be more offensive instead of just waiting until one of us is being sued, or by not doing something like that ourselves, you sort of set up yourself in a passive situation. And there are more things that we can do. For instance, the Dutch organization Bits of Freedom has had this Big Brother award for, I think this time we have it for the 10th time, whereby you publicly denounce what's going on. There is a list, a procedure of nominees. And it does create a debate about privacy, and you sort of pinpoint those are the people that are doing it. But you can be much, much more offensive, and I think that we should, because otherwise you do put yourself in a situation in which individuals are targeted, and once you act as a group, you do become more of a collective, and you can actually say that you're speaking for a number of people, a number of organizations, and it's not something that we've been consciously thinking about. So that might be a next step to consider.
The organization that I've worked with for many years, FAIR, created the Alternative Journalism Prizes, which were called the Pulitzers, for people like Judith Miller. So I think we could expand that too.
And it's difficult in some countries are easier to start a lawsuit in than in others. But for instance, in the Netherlands, you can't sue for civil rights with regards to the Constitution. In the US, you can. So you should actually select wisely. In this country, perhaps this is the best route, and another country, another one. But this idea of crowdfunding and Kickstart, they are valuable tools, and we should start using them for legal means as well. Crowd suing, yeah.
You talked, Jeremy, about how much we can accomplish when we get angry enough. What's holding us back from being really, really angry?
First of all, on a side note, compared to what Gavin said, and with all the immense respect, I think it's not only a question of the traditional left, that whenever we won major political victories, it was people from all across the board, and that right-wing people have equal reasons to be pissed. They may not be pissed because those corporations are allied with big government, but because big government is allied with corporations, you know. And it is about moving everybody and finding those alliances that may sound weird sometimes to make things move forward. I think it is about deeply changing some cultural patterns. And I'm not sure, I use the term anger, I'm not sure it's the right term, because if we start using a vocabulary of militaries when we are actually confronting the military-industrial complex, I mean, they're way in advance to us. I think that when we speak about surveillance in general, we generate anxiety and fear. And as a result of that, we see the behavior change, not for good. Behavior do not change for more speech and more action, but rather the other way around, and self-censorship. So I think we must think of tactics that instead of generating fear and doubt, would generate maybe more empowerment, more joy more love, and more, this joy you have of controlling the machine, knowing that you're in control, of being able to share with your peers what you know.
I think it's one reason why Anonymous has been so successful. Yes. There is a sort of playfulness and weirdness.
Yes, and at the same time.
Yeah. And they've done...
And at the same time, a very violent and military vocabulary and the use of explosions and expectors and very threatening. It is very...
Jake, do you want to come in on this? You talked about interests and class interests.
Yeah, so I want to make a couple of points, I guess. My first point would be that I agree with Jeremy, and I suppose I didn't see Julian's talk yesterday, but this notion that we cause paranoia by telling the truth. I think you see the same thing, environmentalism. I mean, the environment is in a very state, and it can cause people to become depressed from that fact. And we should take that into account. One of the great things that Snowden has done by blowing the whistle, the same as Manning, is that they have changed the dialogue from a thing where we suspect it to a thing we know it. And it is true that that is upsetting. But when people decide that that means that they don't need to do anything about it, that's a mistake. And we should encourage each other to work together despite the fact that it is heavy and that it is depressing. And I think that at the core is a philosophical point. If you see that there's a big mountain to climb in front of you, you might not want to do that. But there is a big mountain to climb. And I mean, if I were to frame it, I guess, with a reflection on the 20th century, I would say that we had great democracies in the 20th century, the likes of which we no longer have in a lot of places. And we had a chance to cut the head off of every single monarch, every single aristocrat, and we failed. And that failure is part of why we have the struggle we have now. So now I'm not saying we should cut their heads off literally, but we must bind them in any way that we possibly can. And we should do that now for the next generations. And that will take a lot of effort, and it will be very difficult. But that is at the core what we need to do. And when we do that, everything else will become much more possible.
Thank you. Anyone else want to come in on this point? Nikki.
I'm very pleased that the subject of surveillance and fear has come up, because I think this is one that's very worth talking about. Speaking as someone who's written for years about surveillance, I've always got this great ambivalence that partly I am exposing wrongs, but partly I'm helping to spread fear far wider than it needs to be felt. And with this, when we see the Snowden revelations, we've actually got global scale fear and potential chilling going on. And this is an issue that I think we have to be aware of. Because what does surveillance mean? Surveillance means some practical effects. It means particular groups are being disadvantaged. It means that governments are being undermined in what they're doing, smaller governments by bigger governments and so on. Those are the practical effects. But the other side of it is that if people listen to the way that the surveillance news is being talked about, it's actually affecting people personally. You know the story about the panopticon, the idea, this old idea that people will live their lives differently if they think they're being watched all the time. And so I worry about this very much in the talk about mass surveillance. I actually think it is wrong and counterproductive for people who want to dramatize and get attention for surveillance issues to tell ordinary people that everyone's being spied on all the time in everything that they do. Because it's not true, and it is deeply debilitating, I think. And so what I'm saying is an empowering part of what we...
I don't understand. What about tempora? I mean, tempora is everything all the time, and the GCHQ uses that to target people for drone strikes. So if you're a Muslim or a friend of a Muslim in Pakistan and you communicate with people in the United Kingdom, you may actually get that person killed. And that is, in fact, the reality, which is terrifying. But nonetheless, we should not deny that reality, and we shouldn't dramatize it. It's actually that bad.
But we don't all feel it the same.
But what I was saying was that some of the surveillance is having the practical effects that you say, and some of it, and the person who lives in a little town somewhere in England and isn't involved in politics, and who is fearful about being involved, isn't involved in a big way, but is fearful about what they read and where they go and what they do on the internet, is collateral damage, because they're actually, it's all going on in their own head. And what I'm saying is that it's the way that we talk about it. That if we say, if we gain attention for what we're saying, by not saying there is the capability to spy on everybody and it is used in these instances, but we say everybody is being spied on, I'm afraid that people out there are listening to that and they're changing their lives and their lives are being shrunken by that. I'm just saying, we want to be careful, but can I just finish? Can I just finish what I'm saying?
Agree, but I would say
can I finish what I'm saying? The reason this matters...
If you go to the Inspire website, because you're interested in Al-Qaeda, you are going to be targeted by these people. It is the case that these surveillance systems are, in fact, watching people all the time, and it is machines now that make a lot of the decisions about it. And if you do not change your life, you will, in fact, feel the impact of it. Whether you're a rural person in the United Kingdom and you pretend that you have no role in politics, these systems are designed to automatically find you when you do something like that, and then they step it up and take it to another level. It's true that they won't drone strike someone with a sheep in the middle of nowhere in the United Kingdom, but it is absolutely the case that those people will get extra attention over a time, and there may not be a feedback loop that is instantaneous. So it is better to inform people of this reality, I think, than it is to pretend that that isn't happening and to never draw consequences from it at all.
Sure. I mean, let me just interject for a second here that I do think it's a question of our media diet. And the diet of the stories that we tell, the diversity of the stories that we tell. Because I think it is possible for us to retain in our head two thoughts at the same time. One, this technology exists, the capacity exists. Two, that I would say white people in the wealthy countries have had more privacy than most people in the entire world. And most people in the entire world don't have that hold them back from making some of the most extraordinary changes that we've seen made in our lifetimes. That there are stories of extraordinary change making even in this moment, in this atmosphere and in this environment, that I think perhaps we just need to tell some of these stories as much as we tell the stories of targeting and intimidation. What do you think, Jeremy? You disagree?
No, I agree, but it's what we see here is that we have ourselves a problem in wrapping our head around those two extremes. We need to convey to the world the extent of mass surveillance, but we need to do it in a way that won't have this result, that is this self-censorship and this change of behavior towards more compliance and being more in control. And this is something we didn't find how to do yet. And I have a little bit of a hint here. I don't know as much about journalism as I know about computers and politics. But from those parts I know, I understood that we lost the habit of putting human first. This got lost in translation, got lost somewhere. And I heard Gavin mention a trustworthy relationship before. And I think it is about rethinking trust, reinventing trust, and feeding ourselves from trust. And trust doesn't come from a logo, from a brand, from a company or something faceless. Trust actually comes from a face, comes from a human. And we have to look at ourselves, maybe redefine what it is to be a human, actually to be a chimera of a human machine that we already are, with those computers in our pockets and soon on our noses and under the skin. This is what we have become. We are the cyborg already. We have other tactile surfaces than our own. We have memory external to our brains and lots of sensors. And maybe it is about understanding ourselves as this modified, is it improved or decreased human, I don't know. But us as the chimera human machine should think about the implications in terms of trust. It is about our humanities and putting them first.
We should just point out to Jake that you are the superhuman in this format. It's so enormous that every expression on your face is like Big Brother staring down at us. So just be aware of that. Here.
Philosophical question. It seems to me that human rights have been infringed on all of us. Corporations and national security today are operating transnationally. So why are we choosing to sue a government in a particular location where we could use, I don't know, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, go to the International Court of Justice and say, you have screwed at all, please stop. It is not an issue that can be solved by an individual country, and we saw here, we have people from every single nationality agreeing with that. So why do we need to react at a country level? Because one of the biggest issues that we have is that all the theory that American citizens cannot be spied and everybody else can, we're shooting our own foot with that. Whereas if you say humanity should not be spied, period, it's a universal human right. It's Article 12, I think.
Yeah, well, one reason to start suing governments is because you can't sue a company to get your rights. I mean, that's not their decision. What you can and must do is think of stuff. Well, previously was ACTA, now we have TTIP. This transatlantic, where actually companies are setting themselves up as some kind of court, non-transparent, and which they start infringing upon the rights upon countries as well. I know it's a big problem, but the only instance that we can sue for our rights are at the moment governments, and we should do it more and more.
I have a thought on this, if I may interject.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I would say is that I think that we should talk about this in the frame of revolution. And I think that the reason that I'm saying that is a little bit strange to everyone in the room, but let's put it this way. We have some specific goals. For example, we wish to maintain a free press where we can share information openly. And I think that if we talk about it in those terms, we need a diversity of tactics. The legal frameworks of the world are part of that diversity of tactics. It is only one. But just as we have the legislative, the judicial, and the executive branches, for example, we need to recognize that we need another branch, and that is the technological branch. What actually stops spies is what is possible. That is, whatever is technically possible. So this is where we need cryptography, and that's also complementary with legal strategy. But we need, at the same time, social movements that recognize that this affects everyone. So, for example, when Nikki says that this person in the middle of nowhere is not affected by mass surveillance, I disagree strongly. When they don't stand up for you, and when they do not stand up for Julian Assange, who has been stuck in this embassy now for several years, what they are doing is they are complicit. They are involved with it. Silence is complicity, especially with mass surveillance issues. And that's why we must raise the consciousness about these issues. And we need to do it in every forum, in every possible way, with every tactic that is practical and sustainable.
Which is simply to say we need a continuity. Surely a connection from our opposition to the police state's policing of the most vulnerable to our struggles around freedom of speech for everyone, right? I mean, this is a continuum of struggle here.
Sorry, I'd like to chime in as well.
Go ahead.
Yeah, probably most of the folks here actually have no idea who I am. My name is Kerry Shankman. I'm a US-based human rights lawyer, and this actually thinking about these issues in a human rights context is the bread and butter of what I do. And actually, these issues came up a lot today. Unfortunately, Ben Emerson, I can't be here, but one of the points he made, he's one of the UN Special Rapporteurs, is he thinks that it's actually, the odds are close to zero that we'll ever see any sort of international agreement or convention on surveillance just because of its nature. And I think particularly what we're seeing is that we have this very problematic situation in terms of a universal human right in the sense that surveillance is something that's applied using differential, hypocritical standards, where states use different standards for those within their borders than they do for those outside their borders. And when you're trying to apply any universal right, it basically makes it impossible to do that if every single state is applying a different rights or not respecting the rights at all of those outside its borders than within. But I do think that it is important, as Jake said, to still consider human rights as part of this framework, because fundamentally, surveillance is an issue of free expression. The chilling effect that occurs when people know that they are being watched infringes our fundamental right to receive and impart information. And that's the reason right now, whereas there is no separate UN mandate on privacy yet, there's a lot of talk and interest in establishing it. The place where privacy and surveillance is currently being studied is within the mandate for freedom of expression, because it is a free speech issue. And the advantage is there. If we can really make it clear that this is not some separate like privacy, or just in the US we would say Fourth Amendment issue. This is a free speech issue. It affects our ability to communicate information. That is a universal norm, and there are instruments, there are bodies, regional bodies, European bodies like the European Court of Human Rights, international courts, where you can actually create action for that. So I don't think it's the answer. For a lawyer, I am pretty cynical about it, but I think it should be a part of the analysis.
Can I add a little something?
Can we just bring on this question? Let's have one more question, then we can respond.
A compliment. It's really a compliment.
Okay.
I'll make it very quick.
Okay. Yeah, I'm coming to you. Just
I think that it is valid as a tactic, as Jake said, within the context of a multiplicity of tactics. And our Spanish friends do crowd suing already of bankers and corrupted politicians, and they're getting results, and it's wonderful. But among the diversity of tactics, the most important are the ones we didn't invent yet. But we should, and I think we must inspire ourselves from the tactics of our opponents. And what they do is legislative bootstrapping and forum shopping. You start something in an easily influenceable area and say, aha, look, they're doing it. Therefore, we'll do it here and here and here. And choose instances until it works. And when it doesn't work, you create your own, like an international trade agreement. I think we could get inspired to that and give a global resonance to our tactics.
Let's take some questions. I would like to take a couple. So let's have you, and then let's have one more.
Okay. Yeah. It's a couple of questions and comments, but I'll really be quick. One is we have tax havens where people come under a single jurisdiction to get out the laws of a different country. Can we have a journalistic haven? Go for the most privacy-friendly country, and people create shell journalist organizations and to work underneath that. Would that help them in any way? That's a legal question. The next one is this is the, sorry, this is a criticism. This is the wrong conference. This needs to be to activists, because it's the activists who are feeling surveillance now in different communities. Okay, I know you're journalists and you're going to expose it, but we feel it now. Yeah. So we know, we don't need to be persuaded that there's this machine out there, because we know there's a machine out there. In terms of telling everybody that what is going on is great. People might be fearful of that surveillance machine, but I would monitor two other things, and that is the militarization of civil services like the police, etc. Is that happening along with the surveillance? And are the laws changing along with the surveillance? If those three things are happening along with the demonization of a section of the population, then we need to worry and we need to know about it, and those activists who are the first to be picked up, plus the communities that are demonized, need to know. They don't know because the journalists haven't spoken. Okay? Yeah, that's the other thing. Sorry, just one.
Wait, let's bring on someone else. Those were two great questions and comments. Thank you. I'm listening for question marks.
Hi, I'm Linda Jew, and I direct an investigative reporting center in San Francisco, and I'm also on the advisory board with Dan Ellsberg of exposefacts.org. So I'm wearing a couple of hats while I'm here. So to the question of needing a revolution, this is the first time I've been waiting for somebody to say this for the entire conference. The questions that I've been wrestling with are, one, what is the journalist's role beyond just the obvious of protecting both the whistleblowers and the hackers and explaining the relationships between the two? But the main question is, how do you get the mass population interested? The person who lives out, the farmer who lives out in the rural country. The journalists have not been able to do this. We've been kind of like a one-trick pony, you know. We've only been focusing on national security issues or international security issues. And the question I've been wrestling with, and I think that all the other journalists in this room should be wrestling with, is how are you going to tell this story so that it matters to the person on the street? Because the only way this is going to change is if you organize any kind of mass action. And so the second question is, what is the strategy for that, which has not been addressed here? And I think that next time for this conference, we need to have some activists, some organizers, as part of some human rights activists, especially as part of this conference, because everybody's working in their own silos. That's what I've seen here. And it's great that everybody's been brought together for the first time. But for me as a journalist, what is the general narrative that I'm going to be able to, that I can tell that will convince the world that that our rights are at stake and our democracies are at stake? So far, we haven't found that narrative that isn't too narrow in its perspective.
As an exposed facts activist, Linda, Linda, as an Expose the Facts activist, is the militarization of Ferguson your issue? I'm sorry. Is the militarization, the militarization of our police force, for example, in Ferguson, Missouri, your issue?
One issue, yeah. I mean, I think that the woman that just spoke before me was absolutely right. The activists and the dissidents all over the world are already feeling this mass surveillance and is keeping more people from speaking out. And I think that's a good point that Nikki made, and we're not touching that. So that's the conversation that needs to be broadened out. And by the way, there aren't enough of these marginalized communities and peoples involved in this conversation at this conference.
More questions, responses? People want to talk to the question of the Journo Haven?
I'd be happy to.
Jake, want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, the answer there is WikiLeaks, right? WikiLeaks is a post-national publication platform of last resort. It was designed to do exactly that, and the IMI, that is the International Icelandic Modern Media Initiative, is exactly this, essentially what you're talking about here. Julian Assange has been working on exactly this issue for the better part of a decade. And I would really recommend, in fact, looking at some of the early WikiLeaks talks to see him discussing exactly these issues and learn from the mistakes. There are a lot of mistakes that were made. For example, treating Sweden as if it was a haven. Big mistake when Carl Bildt is involved, right? That's just not going to go well. And this notion of the militarization of the internet, I agree it's a huge problem. Jeremy Zimmerman, myself, Julian Assange, and Andy Miller-Magoon wrote a book about this. It's available on the Pirate Bay. You can also buy a copy, but don't waste your money. Just pirate it. Called Cypherpunks. And I agree with this point about mass action. We do need mass action, but we also need clandestine action. That's how, for example, the so-called South African miracle occurred. Right? It took 100 years of ANC struggle for actual change to occur, and they had a diversity of tactics. And to that end, we don't have an effective transnational legal recourse. The United States doesn't give a shit about European citizens' rights, and that's very clear. A little political pressure goes a long way, but it really doesn't make a difference. And as a result, we need to consider this in terms of struggle with technology and leaking. For example, go join a secret service. You find out that it's doing the good thing, then do the good thing. But if you find out it's doing an illegal human rights abusing thing, publish it if you can. Get it out there. And that kind of struggle really is a necessity, though it's difficult. I can say that, but I'll never be able to join a secret service. So, I mean, it's advice that I can't follow, which unfortunately, I think that sucks. But in general, I think it's important to note that journalists need to consider themselves as the most important part of that frame, because the law has failed us in these things.
More questions back there. Here.
Well, I think it would be pretty good to get, prime time TV. I work for BBC, and if you had, a great program at 7 o'clock instead of Strictly Come Dancing, then you would get to the people, because the masses probably aren't reading WikiLeaks all the time. But I mean, I work in the organization, and I think that would be incredibly hard.
Maybe you can do it.
Well,
you can do it. You do it.
Yeah, maybe. Okay.
Think of your making of your next pitch. Anyone else? Here.
I'm a TV journalism student at Goldsmiths University.
Can you actually stand up so we can hear?
Oh,
that?
okay.
Thanks.
And something that comes up a lot is money, business, how you can actually make a business out of journalism. And I just wondered whether anyone, maybe a lawyer, has any thoughts on the legality of Rupert Murdoch owning so much media, and whether a monopoly is legal, or even if it's legal for someone who has shares in shale oil to be involved in the reporting of news in countries involved in those conflicts.
Anybody?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I actually think media concentration is one of the most important issues today, because there's actually a scholar, Ben Bagdikian, he wrote a very influential book and updated it recently, basically showing how media, at least in the United States, is concentrated in ownership of, I think it was less than 10 major companies. Six, yeah. And I mean, it's really frightening when you think about that and what that means for the concentration of the opinions and viewpoints, because that, you know, that ownership trickles down, and it means that ultimately, when journalists are trying to report, then they go to their editors, and stuff eventually gets censored in ways that are deeply problematic for democracy. I mean, there are NGOs that do this kind of work. You know, there are, on paper at least, governments that try to regulate this, but I think that can only go so far, because of course, when you have that type of conglomeration, right, you have kind of cross-pollination between other power structures, and it becomes impossible to really trust that regulation, because you have, I mean, you can't really differentiate between the state and the media at that point. So I think the answer is really citizen media, and then the question becomes, how do you support that? And that's, it's, you know, there are many different models for funding that. Creating foundations to try to fund independent media, but that has some limitations. Doing crowdfunding, there are lots of organizations that are experimenting with that. But I think, honestly, the future is in citizen media. Every person in this room is a journalist. All the protesters in Hong Kong are journalists. Anyone can take out their cell phone and record and disseminate information. And that's something that is going to bring us, you know, that is going to bring us diversity of opinion, but it's not going to be concentrated ownership.
Jeremy?
I'll try to prolongate this and try the difficult exercise of answering two very different questions at once. This one about journalism and what it is today and how it gets funded, and the one about activism and the way it must work, because this is what I've been doing for some years now, and I've been working, among others, for 4 years on defeating ACTA. This battle was impossible to win, and we won it in a glorious, joyful, and very diverse way, and not much press attention was there until the very last moments. And as a short anecdote, she's now a good friend of mine, a journalist in a considered left-wing newspaper, Daily in France, wrote what would have been the first paper on ACTA in 2010, and she did an amazing job calling everyone in the commission and so on. Gave it to her editor-in-chief, who checked it and looked, oh, there's no AFP feed on it, so it's not important, and rejected the paper. What we've seen, on the other hand, is a flourishing of independent sources that reported on ACTA right from the beginning. Some NGOs, some bloggers, some independent media. And this is on this infrastructure, this decentralized infrastructure of people with very diverse interests, that we built a momentum that brought millions of people in the streets of more than 200 cities in 27 countries of Europe, with no centralized organization, no political leader, not one color, but the joyful diversity. And what happens, in my opinion, the media in France that are not sinking right now are Le Canard Enchaîné, Mediapart, Arrêt sur Image, and a few others that have in common that there is 0% advertisement on them, and that they rely only on selling access, but they sell much more than access. What people pay for, I think, is independence. I think this is the real value, and that you do not pay to access some zeros and ones anymore, because, you know, there is the Pirate Bay and many other sources. You pay for enabling people to do what you think is good. And many people who claim they do journalism forgot about that today.
Here. Your question.
Yes, obviously I'm grateful to be part and to benefit from this symposium, but as a Muslim and also as somebody that has seen so many things happening during this, in the years, in the extradition of Barbara Ahmed and Talha, and also after that we see why is there so much of fear and apprehension, especially amongst the Muslim community? We are speaking about Julian and Snowden and also Chelsea, and all this, obviously, it's been supported because the Muslim community is facing with the very same similar situations. Right now, as I'm staying here, I think of Shakir Amir. He's still in Guantanamo, and it's almost 14 years. So when we see that a man that is cleared for release, no charge, no trial, and as an activist, we are speaking about surveillance and obviously investigation. many of the imams are as if though they are made not to speak out against any of these issues which concerns humanity. So how do we go about when we want to come together and support all causes where there is injustices happening in the world? And how is it that if we continue speaking out against a man that is cleared for release, no charge, no trial, still in Guantanamo, and the last Londoner, we just also would like to make a request, just like how we had that visualization and the program before, can this also be supported? Because we support any person that is suffering injustice. So that was my point, that I'm grateful that you have given us this platform to attend such an important symposium. But I think we need to look at the broader picture, because all of us are the children of Adam, and there has to be some commonality. Just like how we highlight issues of Snowden and also Julian Assange and all of those who are arrested and all those who are incarcerated, can we help those who don't have a voice, those prisoners? Thank you.
Can we bring I want, Jake, you want to respond, I hear you, but Susan, David, come on down. While we're talking about visualization and making things visible that are invisible and heard that are unheard, let's bring our artists back to the stage too. Jake, you wanted to respond.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thanks to that person who just spoke about the Muslim community. I think in the United Kingdom, there's an incredible thing that is going on right now, especially with Somalis who are living in the United Kingdom, where the British intelligence services are trying to force everyone they possibly can to become informants under threat of deportation, stripping them of their citizenship, which is Theresa May's favorite tactic, mass, very specific targeted surveillance. Everyone that talks about how targeted surveillance is great, you're really talking about how you get total surveillance of the Muslim communities, because each one of those people is a target, let's say. And I think that we really need to have a lot more investigative journalism covering the issues of people that are marginalized in society. The way that people talk about Muslims today, I live in Berlin, and the way that people talk about Muslims today reminds me of the way that people talk about in Germany 50, 60, 70 years ago about Jewish people like myself. And I think that is absolutely terrifying to see that. And this time around, it could go differently. But we actually see that those people are being stripped of their citizenship. They're being drone striked. They're being jailed without trial. They're being put in places like Guantanamo Bay. And in many cases, no one speaks up for them. But the United Kingdom, in some cases, when people go on the BBC to talk about exactly this, they're literally arrested at the BBC studio afterwards. That is unbelievable that is happening. And we have to stand up with the Muslim communities, not just in solidarity because we're brothers, in the sense that we're all sons of Adam. I don't believe that, but because we are human beings, we are conscious, and because universal rights are, in fact, that. They're universal for everyone. Those people are under attack in a way that is unbelievable, and we must stand in solidarity with them, and we should show how they are being marginalized and victimized by, especially the British, especially Theresa May, and especially the intelligence services of the United Kingdom.
Susan, do you want to add something to this part of the conversation?
Yes, I can. The one thing I would say, and in some way it was very much behind it was part of the motivation, or I think, no, part of the necessity for doing the work that we did on with the drone strike visualizations was precisely to, in some way, intervene in a situation where that had only been largely represented as a set of statistics, and statistics are abstract. They don't represent a condition that people live through on the ground. Certainly something I've done in my own, I've done a lot of work, for example, on the detrimental effects of living with this constant sonic soundscape, which is not part of the discourse around the kind of precise way in which a Hellfire missile operates. But suffice to say that the work that we've tried to do in some way was to countervene a certain absence, I would say deliberate set of absences around a set of representations, so that these events that are supposedly happening in a place sort of far away, it's very easy for a kind of Western readers of news to not pay attention when they're confronted with a set of numbers that are largely abstract. The other thing I would say is that law is itself another form of abstraction, and really the project that I work on tries in some way to intervene in these two kind of modes of representation, both legal and, I would say, data aggregation, that in some way the level of abstraction allows a certain disengagement to take place, and it's really the kind of necessity for some of the work that we do is to actually create much more kind of ground truth, if you will. What does it mean to live under these conditions of extreme violence? And so that is certainly one of the ways that I would want to answer that question.
Nikki, we haven't heard from you in a while. Is there anything you want to contribute?
Sorry, pardon?
Were you nodding your head a little while ago? Is there something you want to contribute?
I wasn't going to, but actually I will say something, which is just to reinforce what's being said, which is that when there are human rights abuses, they do not touch everyone equally. And so I was very glad that that man, the Muslim man, spoke, because it's actually a really legitimate challenge to everybody. That's what I would say, that the hardest issue today is to face the anti-Muslim propaganda around the world. And that is where human rights are biting country by country, and we have to try harder. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Arjen Kamphuis. I co-authored the purple book you all got in your goodie bag. One remark and maybe a suggestion for hopefully a bigger conference next year. One remark that I kept hearing several times, not just on this conference, but over the last 2 years that I've been working with the CIJ, journalists seem to be very worried how they get paid if they're trying to change the world. I've been working, as several other people here, on free software for over a decade. Some people here have been much greater heroes, have been working on it for over 30 years. We've given software that everybody in this room has used, even if you don't know it. The question of how we get paid while we do it has never come up. This is not your important thing. A suggestion, I live in Berlin. Berlin teaches you two important things. One, a society can claw itself back from fascism. And two, the price for that is horrific. Better to fight the fight when you're not yet there and get back to democracy. I would suggest maybe we get some older German people over here next year to explain that for people who don't deeply understand that. I think that might be instructive, because maybe that still needs to be done. But the people who were in the resistance in the Second World War, who ran much greater risks than any journalist in the UK when they simply asked the question, why isn't Tony Blair in jail for war crimes, never asked the question, how will I get paid when I do this work? This is not the important thing here. You're trying to save your society. You know, sure, we all need to pay rent, and that's a problem, and that's real. But it shouldn't be your first concern. There's some bigger stuff going on right now that we need to talk about.
Thank you. Can I react to that? Thanks so much for this comment on two regards. First of all, of course, we couldn't agree more, I think, in this room that human rights concern everyone, that we all need to care and such. But if you haven't a background in political science or in history, or in the case of people close to Berlin, for instance, have somebody one generation away from you who died for their freedoms, it remains a bit of an abstract concept. And this is where the need for strong narratives comes into place. I personally almost gave up on speaking about privacy when I've seen how much it is difficult to convey that beyond our circles. I now speak of for intimacies, because everyone has one, everybody understands what it means to be naked, to be in full trust, alone or with somebody else, and to be able to be truly oneself. So I think there's a lot of work to do to change this abstract concept of human rights into very concrete everyday realities, and this is what journalists should work on. Also, for your comment on free software, thank you so much. And I won't try to bring an answer about how to fund it, but as we are supposed to talk about alliances here, I want to state that there are thousands of ways to contribute to free software. You do not need to know about computer programming. You do not need to be the Mozart of computer programming. You can do translation. You can write documentation. You can do graphic design. You can do web design. You can just speak about it, promote it, do what Laura said when she said, I use Tails. And it enabled me to do my work. Write about it. Use Tails for 1 week and write about it and write what were the good points and the bad points about it. And it will help everyone. And if none of the above applies, then yes, you can make a donation. If you have some money, you can send 5, 10, or 100 euros to the project you use every day. There are many, many ways to contribute and build alliances in and around free software, and we need more of that.
Somebody who hasn't spoken yet. Sorry, Linda.
Mike Harris from the Don't Spy Us campaign. It's interesting that no one on the panel has mentioned politicians or political parties.
Politicians.
A full stop. I mean, I tweeted, have we given up hope in our formal democratic? Yeah, I think we have.
Yeah.
And that fills me with slight concern, but also it makes me think of something that Tom Watson, who is an MP and who is good on this issue, said at a Labour Party conference. He said, if you've given up on the political process, you need to think to yourself, this is the only purchase on power we have, apart from civil society and apart from journalists and other challenges. But we can't totally give up on the political parties. We can't totally give up on the political system. So I would urge the Don't Spy Us campaign, the run-up to the general election, we're going to be getting candidates from all the different political parties to pin their colours to the mast and to say, are they going to back us in rolling back on surveillance? And if they don't, then voters can make a pledge not to back those candidates, not to back those political parties. But I also urge people to go and see your MPs and ask them, what are you going to do about this issue? Because if we let them off the hook, and if we don't engage with them, then, you know, they're not going to do anything.
Actually, we spoke about them.
Yeah.
Maybe you were tweeting at the time.
Yeah. Karen?
Yeah.
Well, let's just have Karen respond.
Yeah, there is one really big problem. It's not only surveillance that's part of the whole system, but it's also this notion we need to control fraud. In the Netherlands, one of the saddest things that has happened, there was one person very much associated with Bits of Freedom, a professor in law, intellectual property right. Actually, he was one of the co-members of the jury for the Bits of Freedom Big Brother Award. He moved on to politics. He became an alderman, Social Democrats in Amsterdam. He moved on to the government. He's vice president at the moment. And he is connecting all kinds of data. He's implementing one of the biggest systems in the Netherlands. He is actually nominated to get a Big Brother award at the moment. We are losing politicians in a huge way. I would love to put my trust in them, but I can't anymore. I'm sorry.
We have about 5 minutes left. Thank you, Karen. Here.
My name is Rosemary Batchelor. I'm from Open Democracy, and I'm very interested in this question of trust. And I wonder whether it isn't something to do both with a persuasive political analysis and with a strong enough political alliance to go with it. And I'm thinking of one question I'd like to put to human rights lawyers. With cases being taken to Strasbourg, if they begin to become more successful, is there a danger that it would be easier for countries like the UK to just move out of the European Convention of Human Rights and abandon it? So I think, again, I'm returning to this question of what we should ask our politicians to do and just how broad our political alliance has to be for any of us to feel that this is a trustworthy process. Thanks.
Thank you.
I get the sense that was...
Well, let's let Eva have a question too, and then...
It's actually not a question. I just wanted to relay something that was mentioned on Twitter, because apparently when Jake is speaking, specifically when he mentioned WikiLeaks, it was muted on the stream online. So I thought it was worth mentioning.
Freedom of speech strikes again. How do we want to close out here? I would like to do one thing, which is to, if you trust us, our Muslim friend, I would love to hear your name, and if you want to come join us up here, please do. And then I would perhaps like to get closing comments from people, and then we will issue out into the world and make the kind of change we're talking about, right? By like Tuesday, I'm thinking. But maybe closing comments. Who wants to start?
Lawrence, one more comment here.
Oh, there's one more comment.
Yeah, please, can you please come in the light?
And just a quick note to the lady with the European Court question. I'm happy to talk about that. I know we're running out of time, but I'll stick around afterwards because I have many thoughts on that. So.
And let's let our friend come to the forward. Yeah. Thanks for trusting us and for coming. Okay, your comment?
Yeah, thank you. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm as an Iraqi who's had this tremendous opportunity. I'm on scholarship. The British government is paying for it. I hope they don't regret it. And it's just the whole 3 days I've been thinking about the tremendous people I've met and how I would just love to take you all back to Iraq or Jordan or Lebanon or Syria or Egypt or Palestine, where I have friends. And my one request to CIJ, and I am immensely grateful for being here, is I just think there are a lot of really spectacular activists and journalists in the Middle East, in Iraq and neighboring countries who aren't here, who probably won't be granted a visa. I don't know, but I'm just thinking one thing I want to do is take some of the networks I've made here and connect people in Iraq. Another thing I would like to see, even if it's not logistically possible, to bring activists from NGOs and journalists to London, is to be able to connect them via video link. And finally, to use my 15 minutes of fame, is I am from Iraq, I'm going back to Iraq. One thing I really want to do is, especially that we all have spoken about how some areas are inaccessible to journalists because they're dangerous, but you have a lot of very passionate people with iPhones who are uploading things on the internet, and if there was a way to mobilize them, train them, and be able to reach out to them, and if you as a Western journalist cannot go to places, and I wouldn't advise you to, then maybe there's a way to strengthen this network and have their voices heard. And if anyone needs any help in that regard, I'm here. I'm happy to
What's
help
your name?
and connect you. Mona. My name is Mona Fadl. I'm a student at Goldsmiths.
Mona Fadl, you come up here too. Gavin, you want to kick us off in our closing comments?
Yes, I mean, there's been a lot of really valuable things said, and I would just say make a few remarks about a couple of the suggestions made, which struck me as being very, very valuable for us. One of them suggests that we could form some kind of structure which would enable whistleblowers and hackers and journalists to work together in some way. And I expect that one of the best ways of doing that, as always with these things, is to do it individually yourself to start. And then when we get enough people together who trust each other, we can actually build a proper organization to enable that to happen. I don't think that's impossible at all. I think it's the first stage of what we came here to do today. And I think the other thing we hope to do is to understand the important role that whistleblowing plays. It's no longer an abstraction. It's now a small tsunami of whistleblowers, and we have to provide them the space to do what they do and the protection to enable them to continue. It's just like there are 40-odd WikiLeaks going on in various forms around the world, we need other forms that will replicate that for the safety of whistleblowers and for journalists, despite people who have enormous sophistication in a contrary way to us. So I would wish all of you the very best to do what you do so that we can raise the level of exposure so that it becomes something we're all really proud of, so that when we come perhaps to meet again next year, we can actually talk about some of the successes we've had this last year. So only more power to all of you, and I'm delighted that you're all here.
Jake, you want to come in? I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you to hold your applause to the end so that everybody can get heard. Jake.
Yeah, I just want to say to the woman who spoke about Iraq, I'm really sorry. We tried very hard to stop what happened in Iraq, and we failed. I went to Iraq in 2005. I hitchhiked in. I interviewed people in northern Iraq, mostly in Kurdistan. It was fucking scary. It was unbelievable unbelievably scary. I'm so sorry that my country has done that to your country. And I'm so sorry that the media hyped the threat and destroyed a generation, essentially. And I'm sorry, just as one human being to another, that we did not stop them before that happened. And so we should make sure to support people on the ground there now, so that we can hopefully change that for the future. Because the only thing that will stand between states doing that and not doing that in the future, I think, is when the state simply cannot do it, when members of the state, citizens of the state refuse. And on a closing note, I would say that this has been really quite an honor. And I'm really sorry that I couldn't be there in person to see so many people that I respect and admire. Nikki, even though you and I have never met and I was sort of arguing with you a bit, I just want to say I have the utmost admiration for your work. And I hope that in the future, all of us will be able to meet in person somewhere where Laura and I can both come to this place. Maybe that's the UK, but I don't see that happening soon. So hopefully the next time this event is held, it's held in a free place. So come on over to Berlin.
Anybody else want to add a closing comment? Jeremy?
I could briefly... I will withhold my negative comments about politicians and the political system and what we could do in it, because I've been doing that for 6 years and a half. But the positive things is that it is about knowledge and sharing knowledge. And if we do this without compromising with our core values, without compromising on the defense of fundamental rights, without compromising on the patterns for technology that make us more free, and have the courage to reinvent ourselves. I think it is about sharing this courage as much as it is about sharing knowledge. And this is only at this price that we will get to this empowerment. So let's share knowledge and share courage, and fuck, let's do it.
Knowledge, courage. Knowledge, courage. Anyone else?
What?
Knowledge, courage. Anything else?
I'll add one.
Love.
Thanks. I'd like to add one to that, which is patience. It's only been a 3-day conference. You can't do everything in that. But let's all keep working together. Yeah.
All right. I'd encourage us to stand up. David inspired me anyway to go and stand on one of those chairs. If you don't have, if you have a chair to stand on, maybe just at least stand up. Okay. Everybody here, thank you so much for taking the courage to come to this conference and for taking all the steps that you'll take right after this. Are you willing to take a stand? Looks like it. Thank you, everyone.
Jeremy.
For free speech. Free speech and intimacies. Thank you so much. Richard is wanting to have one last word. Richard Logan, come on up here. Thank you.
At Kevin's place, a dinner with Julian.
You can stay standing if you like. I don't know. My ass has been dead for a couple of hours. There are a couple of things. I just want to go back, top and tail this. I had the first word in this conference, and I did call it the inaugural conference. That should have given you a hint that we're going to be doing this again. All right? So second thing, it's come up just towards the end of the conference here that perhaps the representation of this conference was not as balanced as it might have been. And we do need more Muslims, more people of color, more people across the whole spectrum. There's so many things that need to be done, and they can't be done unless everyone is involved. This is worldwide. The last thing I wanted to say was what a great honor it's been for me, for our foundation, to be the sponsor here. It's touched what's left of my heart. Truly. And I really wanted to thank all of you. I mean, you're not all here, but now, people who were here a day ago or 2 days ago. But it's really you who've made this conference fantastic. just incredible. People who've come from London, who come from other countries in Europe, around the world, people who've come from other galaxies. It's just been fantastic. And it's not only the speakers and the contributors up here, but all of you who've come and listened and put your 2 cents in. It's been fantastic. And the round of applause should be for you. Thank you. Thank you very much.